Hey everyone, welcome into another edition of the Woj Pod. Here with Atlanta Hawks coach Lloyd Pierce and Utah Jazz coach Quin Snyder, who together have formed a committee on racial justice and reform with the National Basketball Coaches Association. Several meetings over this weekend among the league's 30 coaches, and these are two now of the leaders of the NBA's coaching fraternity who are determined to have an impact, not just in their communities and with their organizations, but nationally right now in this time of crisis. Quin, Lloyd, guys, how are you this morning?
Good, Woj. Thanks.
Doing well. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for jumping in. This was, for everybody in this country, this has been a dramatic and heartbreaking and really devastating period of time over the past weeks. And the Coaches Association, which you two are obviously a part of, issued a strong statement this morning. We reported on it about police brutality, racial profiling, the weaponization of racism, and talked about how shameful, inhumane, intolerable it is. There's a lengthy statement that's available for people to read. But what you also did this weekend, guys, was put together a committee on racial injustice and reform to try to pursue some solutions around NBA cities. And I think people are familiar with some of the names on that committee. It's been certainly some of the leaders, not just in the NBA, but in all of sports on social issues. Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, David Fizdale, Stan Van Gundy, but also Lloyd Pierce and Quin Snyder. And you guys are part of that committee. Take me through, Lloyd, and you were instrumental in putting this together from Friday night until Saturday. When you get 30 NBA coaches on a Zoom call, what was the conversation in your coaching fraternity about, really activating as a group?
Honestly, a lot in a very short period of time. I had just gotten off a Zoom call Thursday evening with our players and our staff. And I think I shocked our players with the emotion I expressed about the events that have occurred over that few days. I think at that point it's Thursday. It's just Sunday and Monday night where we're seeing the incident in New York and we're seeing the death in Minneapolis. And from that speaking engagement with the players and the emotional side of it, I just could not stop thinking that this has to be discussed. Things have to change. We have a platform. What can I do with our team, with our organization, and naturally with our Coaches Association, of which we all belong, and we're all unified on a lot of different things. But this is probably the most important thing that we need to be unified on. And that was simply just a phone call. I reached out to David Vogel. David reached out to Rick Carlisle. We all sat down and talked. And I expressed what I've expressed to Tony Ressler, what I've expressed to our players, and what ultimately I expressed to the coaches. I am not okay. I was extremely emotional this week. There's a fear as an African-American man. Forget the coach part. The coach part is irrelevant. As an African-American man, there's a fear that I have, that I know a lot of other people have, that needs to be addressed and needs to be spoken about. And, I told Rick and I told David, I said, if we truly are an association, if we're a coaches association and we're unified on certain things, this is the most important thing. We need to do something and it has to happen now. And Rick was tremendous.
And you're talking about Rick Carlisle, the Dallas president of the Coaches Association.
Yeah, he was tremendous. I've been in a lot of conversations with the assistant coaches in our league that are African American, and JB Bickerstaff is in our committee, just so that name was left out. Mm-hmm. And he's in that conversation that I have with the Jamal Mosley, David Vanderpool, JJ Outlaw, Johnny Bryant, John Bryant, Darvin Ham. There's so many people that we speak to consistently, not just about this, but all the time. and they're all messed up. They're all bothered. They're all emotional. And I expressed that to the coaches. So the conversation was initially get every coach on a Zoom call. And we all need to communicate well with one another about what's going on just amongst us so that there's a greater understanding of what's going on in our world. We have a leadership position. We have a platform. But if we don't really understand the true origin of the problem and the fact that it's affecting some of us, if not all of us, and it should be affecting all of us, but the fact that it is affecting all of us, we need to figure this out now. And to every coach's credit, JB, Bickerstaff, myself, and Rick, we split up the 30 coaches in the NBA, and we just called literally personal phone calls. My first call was to Coach Pop. My second call was to Coach Kerr. And that's my relationship with those two guys from Team USA. And we've had this conversation before when we were in China over dinner. I just asked, are you available to have a meeting? And I need your support because I just feel compelled that we have to do something as a coaches association. And that's how the meeting started. Everyone within, I would say, 2 hours was reached, was contacted by myself, Rick Carlisle, or JB Bickerstaff, and every coach was fully supportive and in attendance the next day at 5 p.m.
Quin, and I think part of what I was told that some of the conversations centered on this weekend with your group was this has to be all 30 coaches and there's 180 assistants. And, certainly head coaches have a different public platform than an assistant would have. But I think the idea that this isn't something as a group we're going to just leave to either our black coaches or Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, Stan Van Gundy when he's been a head coach in a league. And I know he was a part of that letter this weekend and a part of this. Stan has been a voice on these issues. But the idea that everyone's got to play a role in this, Quin, and your fraternity, was that something you felt among the group?
Yeah, I think the first thing I felt, because the meeting began with Lloyd, expressing himself and really asking us, without being accusatory in any way, but to me, trying to be transparent with myself. And frankly, some of the, one of the things, Lloyd, that you talked about was the conversations that you had with assistants. And some of the guys that Lloyd just mentioned, a Darvin Ham, a Johnny Bryant, are close friends of mine. And I know, as you're thinking about, yourself and what your role is, I know I hadn't done the kind of job at that moment that I could have done communicating with those guys, not just as friends, but as, African-American coaches. Johnny's on my staff. And it made me, as Lloyd was talking more, as JB was talking, as Alvin Gentry was sharing, it made me, catch myself and, ask some really, trying to be transparent with yourself and being a little bit uncomfortable, knowing that, in your heart, I'm not a racist, so to speak, but that's not really what this is about. It is fundamentally, but it's also about being willing, to have that dialogue, to be transparent, to be honest with yourself. And ultimately, I think as a white man, what I was hearing was we need help, and it's not enough to just have support. There has to be a willingness to confront these things when you see them, be willing to take action. And to Lloyd's point, I think this was all the coaches, and I think all the coaches being aware of the fact that we coach some tremendous men and the players, and they're active in their communities and the things they're doing, but also wanting to, to stand, on our own. And, Lloyd's speech was impassioned. I think you qualified it, Lloyd, before you started talking. And that was impactful. It was powerful. And I don't think there was a guy in the room that didn't feel that. So, that we've all got a different perspective and a different experience, but in the fundamental things that were talked about and shared, and there was real dialogue, I think we're all, not just aligned, but very much, shared the same vision of what hopefully we have an opportunity to try to do.
With real guidance and the right coach, NBA teams go from good to great. Just like real help from your State Farm agent can make all the difference in protecting what matters most. And when you think about coaches who have made an impact not just on the court and with championships, but on issues of social impact, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, Doc Rivers, among them 9 NBA championships as head coaches, but even a greater impact as voices for the sport, for social change, and that's leadership at its highest level. Talk to a State Farm agent today about combining your home and auto insurance and get a teammate who can guide you through whatever life throws your way. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Hey guys, since we've all been shopping online the past few months, AT&T has made it easy for anyone that wants to buy a new phone or device online. They're offering fast, free, no-contact delivery and curbside pickup so that online shopping is as simple and safe as possible. On top of that, they have a flexible return policy so you can shop at ease. You can visit att.com to learn how to shop online from the safety of your home 24/7. Subject to change, restrictions apply. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery in the state of Georgia, the young man from Brunswick, Georgia, who was shot down on a road in your state. This is certainly this is a national issue. It has been very much a local, regional source of pain for those in Georgia. Lloyd, the last few weeks from that murder through George Floyd and then the protests in Atlanta over the weekend, what has it been like in your shoes, through your eyes, in this environment, really over this and maybe especially intensive period of time?
It's one of the things that has made me more outspoken in the last few weeks, I guess, is kind of how you frame the question. And so you talked about Ahmaud Arbery and you talked about George Floyd. How far back do we really want to go on this issue? And I think what happens is you don't find that true impact or that awareness or that feeling of being disturbed until it becomes regional, until it becomes, for Ryan Saunders, until it hits Minnesota, for Quin Snyder, until it hits, there's protests in Salt Lake City, until it hits your home, all of a sudden, it's a little bit more impactful. The Ahmaud Arbery was, I went up to vacation at Jekyll Island, which is right next to Brunswick, last April. So I know the area. It's where my wife's family goes every year. That's the problem in and of itself. As we've been complicit. We've all been complicit in our own way, whether we just don't say anything about it or we move on from it. And maybe the pandemic has forced us to sit here and literally watch George Floyd die in front of us because we have nowhere else to go right now. And the people are able to riot, protest, whatever they're doing. The people are expressing their anger. We're expressing our anger. You're seeing more statements now because no one has anywhere to go right now. So we can't run from this problem. We can't move on from this problem that we've had. And When I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about Minnesota, and I was thinking about New York, and I expressed that to the coaches, New York was the most disturbing out of everything I've seen. Because we can go as far back and see, police brutality, police targeting, police murder of black men, to see it weaponized right in front of our eyes on camera, like the lady did in New York, and how it ultimately gets to police brutality is what scared me. And so this week was about that. And then the Minnesota thing was for everyone. And then it's just an awareness that it's going to happen to our city. So now it is in Atlanta. All of a sudden they are rioting and protesting in Atlanta, and we're having to deal with it. And Quinn, you're having to deal with it in Salt Lake City. So even if we weren't prepared for it, even if we didn't get to this meeting, we were going to be forced to get to this meeting somehow, some way, because we weren't going to be able to hide from it, in any shape, form, or fashion. The entire world is having to deal with it right now. And I'm just glad that we're able to recognize it a little bit stronger. I hate that we have to recognize it under these conditions. I'll be more encouraged by what we're able to do as a result of it, of these meetings and these conversations.
Along those lines, Lloyd, Quinn, to turn this into action, to turn this into an impact beyond statements in your cities, your communities in this country, what does that look like to you for the Coaches Association? How have you started to map that out?
Yeah, I think and we've all listened to Killer Mike speak the other day. It's plot, plan, it's strategize. There's some of the key terms he used. We'll have our third meeting tomorrow as a committee. Everyone's got a lot of ideas, and that's we're at least planning, and we're there. The word we've used consistently is sustainable. Whatever we do, it has to be sustainable. I just got off the phone with CP this morning and Chris Paul, and he's head of the Players Association. We need allies. We have a platform. We need to use that platform. But it has to be sustainable. What we've talked about is we've seen the I Can't Breathe t-shirts, and we've seen the patches and the buttons, and we would love to do that. We would love to do any and everything that we can. But what we really need is systemic change, and we need to get with law enforcement officials. We need to talk about those things. And we've thrown out every idea, every possible option of what is true change, impactful change that we can create, that we can keep and sustain. Every NBA city can be a part of it. And it's really that simple. How we go about doing it, we understand this isn't going to happen next week. This is going to take some time. We're going to have to hire some outside counsel. We're going to have to bring in people that are experts in this field. But sustainability is what's most important, not just doing it because we're emotional, not just doing it because we're seeing it on TV this week, but something that the NBA, because of our platform, because of our access, we can create, we can get behind, we can encourage, and we can sustain it. It doesn't matter if I'm a head coach next year. This thing will continue to go on, and everyone should have that mentality, and everyone has shared that. And that's why we had to be unified as coaches, because it isn't, do what you normally do in your local city. We all do something. We all are out in our communities. But as we move on and others move on, is this still continuing to progress for the good of our players, African-American players in our league, for the good of our coaches, for us that have been silent too long, and to not be silent anymore, to know that this is a mandated thing as a head coach and a leader of an NBA team in an NBA city. You're mandated to help be a part of this change.
Lloyd, one of the things for me has just been, and I'm, again this morning, is just trying to listen, because, part of the sustainability and the partnerships that Lloyd's referring to, the white people, this is not just a black problem. That's one of the things I continue to hear and understand, that this is, in some ways, this is a white problem. And that sustainability, those partnerships, it's necessary for white people to listen and to be willing to take action, and not just, to have a voice. And, one of the things that has been impactful to me, and, again, just having an opportunity to see other people sharing, colleagues of mine. And Monty Williams penned a letter the other day, I think yesterday, and one of the things that he talked about was his children. Alvin Gentry mentioned the same thing. And, we're all at home, the TV's on, we're seeing, what's happening in our country. And my kids are there, and I've got a couple of them that are too young really to understand, but sometimes kids understand more than you think. And I've got a couple others that are asking, they're trying to process what's going on. And what we tell our children, what we tell the people that we're close to, our ability to have, even with your kids, it's hard to explain, on a certain level, the magnitude of what they're watching, and knowing that they're going to be, to Lloyd's point, this is not a short-term thing. This is enduring. And part of having lasting change is our families. And it hits home on that level as well. And just to reemphasize or reiterate, I think that's part of what the coaches in the room felt, the white coaches, that, hey, we need to mobilize along with our colleagues, and this has to become as important, and we have to be as committed, as the African-American coaches in that room.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that, Quin. I know you pride yourself on the relationships that you build with your players, and how I think your ability to connect and empathize and understand your guys to be able to coach them. Same with Lloyd. You've got to be able to do that to coach, I think, at any level, but certainly your level. And even doing that, and you mentioned even with your coaching staff, with black coaches on your staff, Quin, do you find yourself going for as much of a connection and the relationships I have? Do you find yourself asking yourself now, or in this recent window, am I understanding these issues enough with them, how they impact my players? Do I ask the question enough? Do we talk on that issue enough? Has that been part of your thought process here lately?
Yeah, and it's kind of what I tried to articulate a little bit earlier. You can be close with somebody, but you can also be close and have blind spots in your relationship. And I wouldn't say this has been a blind spot for me, but it's not always comfortable. And there's always things, no matter how close you are to people, there's places the conversation doesn't always go in as much depth. And, we met with our team. As much as anything, I wanted to feel like I just wanted to acknowledge what was going on. But really that I needed to have my awareness raised, frankly. And, again, being willing to be uncomfortable and then listening. I can't understand on a certain level, just experientially, what Lloyd has been through, what Fizz has been through, and some of the experiences that they've had. They just haven't happened to me. But that doesn't mean that they're not real to me. And my path is different. And there's nothing wrong with that, I think, to understand that, to accept that. That doesn't mean you can't help impact change. It doesn't mean you can't be committed. And listening to our players, like that helped me as well.
I've had to have conversations with two of my white assistants that has been, different. It could easily be woe is me, about me. Hey, I'm the victim. Black men are being murdered. And they heard my fear and my passion and my rage and my anger, everything. My coaching staff heard that. One of the things that really moved me was Chris Gent. I talked to Chris Gent, one of my assistant coaches. He's got a teenage old daughter. And he said for the first time, like he was embarrassed. He was disgusted in his role and what he feels and just not doing enough or saying enough. He said he had the first conversation he's ever had with his teenage daughter about potentially what her role could be. And, the incident in New York with the white woman pulling her phone out and weaponizing or attempting to weaponize the police, how to keep his daughter from becoming that woman and taking advantage of her privilege if she felt she needed to. We all have to be vocal, not just Quin reaching out to Johnny Bryant and some of the black assistants. In order for us to get true change, and as Quin said, it is an issue with it's a white people issue as well, being able to address this comfortably. But it works both ways. I had to address this with Christian. I spoke with Matt Hill, one of my other assistants, last night. He was emotional speaking to our guys in our meeting yesterday for the first time. And he said, I have no idea where it came from. He's finally actually communicating what's been in his heart. He just didn't know how to say it or when to say it or even who to say it to. And so, I just think starting and having these really courageous conversations are extremely important, because everyone has to play their part for us to have lasting change, as Quin talked about.
Hey guys, now more than ever, we have to look out for each other and count on each other. Marathon wants you to know that you can count on them for high quality, top tier gas. Marathon gasolines are formulated with STP additives. They keep your vehicle running at peak performance by optimizing fuel economy, removing those ugly deposit buildups, and by reducing emissions. And right now you can get 5 cents off every gallon every day with Make It Count rewards from Marathon. Plus, you can earn points for additional savings on fuel, airfare, hotels, and more. This is definitely a deal you can count on. It's quick and easy to join. Just download the free Make It Count app or go to makeitcount.com/radio and start saving today. This offer is valid only at participating Marathon stations. Remember, wherever you need to go, be safe. The people at Marathon are behind you all the way. Scott's Turf Builders Triple Action has acquired the secret to building a thicker, greener lawn. In return, they have taken all of the hard work out of the picture to give you more time to do nothing extra. People don't realize that it's easy to get the lawn of their dreams by simply feeding their lawn a few times throughout the year. Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action kills weeds, prevents crabgrass, and feeds to build thick green lawns. With Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action, you can get the lawn you've always dreamt of. Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action will give your yard the nourishment it needs to help your weak, thin lawn recover. When you feed with Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action multiple times throughout the year, your grass will be greener, stronger, and more resilient. Pick up a bag today. This is a Scott's yard. Also, Scott's no quibble money back guarantee states, if you're not satisfied, you get your money back. This is a Scott's yard. In the last few days and thinking about getting on with you guys and talking, I've thought about some of the conversations I've had on this podcast through the years with Dwayne Casey, talking about growing up in the South and being 7 or 8 years old and seeing the Klan march through rural Kentucky as a young man and how that impacted him. Talking to David Fisdale about being a young man in South Central LA during the Rodney King unrest and the impact that had on him. And Lloyd, I wonder, being the leader of the Atlanta Hawks in that city with the civil rights history of that region, does it for you take on or feel like a greater burden, a greater responsibility than you might feel somewhere else? That leadership in that corner of this country maybe even carries more gravity to it?
Yeah, without a doubt. I would feel like a coward being here in this city and not trying to play a part with the community. And I knew that when I took the job. I knew I was going into a city that was unique to all other cities in our country as an African-American man and with the history of African-American men and their leadership for others. My first 2 months here living in Atlanta, I'm meeting Congressman John Lewis with our staff and meeting Ambassador Young. He comes and speaks to our team, and I'm going over to the house of Reverend Joseph E. Lowry and speaking to him. Just those 3 conversations alone, you come out of it, you say, this place is different. This city is different. I'm at Reverend Lowry's party this year and sitting next to Dr. Martin Luther King's only living sibling at the dinner. And so you have to be a voice in this city. And what I've learned is because of that responsibility, you feel every single burden. Quinn, I know you do as well. If a player comes to you and tells you, my aunt has cancer, you can't stop thinking about it. You can't stop thinking about what your player is going through every practice, every game. So multiply that by your players, your coaches, your staff. And in here in the city of Atlanta, it is the African-American issue. That problem this problem is very real. In the racist side, I think, Dwayne Casey has spoken about it and he talked about it, growing up in the South and growing up in the civil rights era. But that's not the only form of racism that we're seeing and dealing with. Just in the pandemic, lower income areas, African-American communities are being affected and being hit by this because they don't have access to healthcare. And so what are they doing? They're out now. These are probably the people that are out or rioting. They're homeless. They're out of work. They don't have access to healthcare. They're seeing black men murdered. They're angry. They're frustrated. They're pent up. And so because no one cares. And so no one cares about African-American men that are being killed. And you just put it all into the same bubble, the same category. And someone needs to hear us when we're frustrated and when we say we're living in fear and when we say that we're hurting right now. Someone needs to hear us because it isn't just black and white and race. It's economic, it's socioeconomic. It's the areas of which we live in. You feel all of that in Atlanta. Atlanta is predominantly black. There's a lot of black-owned businesses that are here, but that doesn't mean there aren't lower-income areas, and that doesn't mean there's a lot of the community here in the city that are forgotten about and being stepped over.
I couldn't agree more about the socioeconomic component. That fuels a lot of things. And our city here in Salt Lake is a contrast to Atlanta, a stark one. We don't have a large African-American population. It's small. But we have players. We have African-American players. I think some of us, Lloyd mentioned it earlier, there was protest, significant protest, not maybe as much in numbers, but impassioned, in Salt Lake the other day. And I don't think people were surprised. But it was noteworthy. I don't know that's you wouldn't expect that just because there's protests across the country. It just shows how pervasive and how intense and emotional this issue is. And, Lloyd and I talked about this, a little bit over the last couple of days. And, our owner, Gail Miller and her family, that own the Jazz and have for decades, she had some comments to our fans last year in our arena, and they were poignant and I think powerful to a lot of people. And it was raising awareness, but it was more than that. It was a statement, about how people need to treat each other, and the fact that they need to confront these things. And she issued another statement yesterday, which, I was pleased to hear. I think our players appreciate it. Statements don't, solve problems, but they certainly can provide some direction. And I think that in our community, seeing what's going on around the country and understanding that you're not removed from it, you're not immune to it just because you don't see, a black person in your neighborhood, just because it isn't touching you the same way. You may need to raise your awareness more. You may need to, be uncomfortable to accept that these things are going on. And it's there's an urgency to this in my mind, and everyone's obviously that's been clear. But the overlay of the economic component to me is also something, and we haven't talked about that. That's a secondary thing, but it fuels some of this stuff, and it makes it even more challenging.
I wonder if either of you have given any thought or much thought to the idea of why do you think that NBA coaches, more than I think any other professional sport, have, whether it's shown a willingness or an ability or an environment that allows for leadership on issues of race in sports or race in America, is there something unique to the NBA or those who coach in the NBA? Or are there restrictions or consequences that might hang over others in other sports that might be different than the environment you both work in?
You know, I can't speak on the other coaches association or if there are associations for the other sports. One of the things since I've been in the NBA is I have relied on our association for a number of issues with regards to our 401k plans, the previous pension plans, healthcare, annuities, ways of growing the game, ways of growing my brand as an assistant coach to a head coach. We've been unified for a long time in having meetings as an association, whether it's during summer league, on the road when you get to New York and you're playing in New York, David Fogel and Karen, they come to the hotel and meet with the entire staff to update us. And so, I think we've had a common connection as an association for a long time. And so I think this is the challenge that we're all facing, when something like that's real, like this, that comes up, that's real, how unified are we? That was the question. How unified are we? We like to come together to speak about our money and to speak about everything we're doing that's well for us. Are we going to come together on this issue? I think our starting point has been tremendous and I'm encouraged in less than 24 hours, we were able to get the entire head coaches together to speak on something that's real. And since then it's been consistent. And, I've continued to receive, Quinn, I hope you have as well, but I've continued to speak to the coaches that are not in the committee about how they can help and what they can do. And, what's the update and, can I send you stuff? So, I applaud our association, but I won't, start cheering. I think what we'll do is we'll applaud and say, okay, let's get back to work. And, when we cheer is when we see change and we see difference.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a collective unification with all the coaches, and the committee's set up, as an organizational, tool to plan and to focus, but there's unification with everybody and how they feel. And I think to your question, I think there's, I don't know what the right word is, an intimacy, or it's probably not best description, but we don't have 30 players. We don't have 40 players. There's less players on an NBA team, and it forces you, I think, to have those interactions, there's times where it feels personal, and as a coach, being willing, to say things that may not be received, initially and may be confrontational, and, that you're willing to say those things, are you willing to talk about these things? And, I'd like to think that, I think all of us strive to earn our players' trust, and to have, for us to trust them. It goes both ways. And so in some respects, that foundation hopefully can be one that can allow us to continue to have dialogue and facilitate some sort of change.
Well, I think the other component that we all sit back and we've all seen Steve and Pop speak on this, and Doc, confidently, comfortably, and as an assistant for years, I've studied them, and, it's great, man. Those guys with that security, that job security and that comfort, it's great that they're doing this for us is how I've interpreted it. But like Quinn said, it isn't, we're going to go as far as the most uncomfortable guy, head coach in our league. We're going to go as a league and promoting and pushing this. Whoever is at the bottom of that in terms of comfort, we know where Pop is. He's at the top of his comfort is, that's where he is. But whoever's at the bottom, whatever elevation we can have in promoting him to speak on this in his local community, to be a part of our association is our growth. And, for me, I'm going to say I am at the bottom. I'm a second year coach that I'm walking into this situation and I'm trying to tackle a ton of things, trying to, grow a team, trying to do it in a tough city in terms of the history of African American in this issue. And then I'm approaching a lot of veteran and seasoned coaches and calling us all out to do more. And so I'm not personally, job security is not an issue of mine. I'm not worried about the consequences. I'm worried about the lack of speaking up.
Lloyd Pierce and Quin Snyder, both members of the NBCA's Committee on Racial Injustice and Reform. Guys, thrilled with what you're doing. Appreciate you taking time to share some of your thoughts and the plans here, and certainly anything we can do to be helpful. We certainly want to. But guys, thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for jumping in today.
Thanks, Woj. Thanks, Lloyd.
Thanks, Woj. Yep, appreciate it.
Thanks to my guest today, Atlanta Hawks coach Lloyd Pierce and Utah Jazz coach Quin Snyder. You can check out new and archived episodes of the Woj Pod wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to check out the Low Post with Zach Lowe, the Hoop Collective with Brian Windhorst, the SVP Pod with Scott Van Pelt, Ariel Helwani's MMA show. And be sure to catch Monday's episode of ESPN Daily with Mina Kimes, in which Minnesota Timberwolves coach Ryan Saunders was her guest. We'll catch you next time.